It is 2 o'clock. I would like to welcome everyone to the Tuesday, March 21st, 2023 work session. And today I have asked Commissioner Sweat to lead us in our invocation and Commissioner Rafalski to lead us in our pledge. If you would stand with us, please.
Please bow your head. Dear Lord, we pray that you would enlighten our mind, heart, and spirit as we spend these moments together. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I move to add item .5 to the published agenda to present a proclamation in honor of George Rose and declaring April 6th as George Rose Day in Glynn County.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Rafalski, a second by Commissioner Clark to add item .5 to our agenda for today. Any discussion? Those in favor, please raise your right hand. That is unanimous. Want to say that Commissioner Booker is feeling ill. I think he is joining us via Teams, or at least trying to. And Commissioner Tostleson had a procedure this morning, and he is indisposed right now. So item .5 is a proclamation. And it's my privilege to get to read that to you today. This proclamation is establishing April 6th as George Rose Day in Glynn County. Whereas Mr. George Rose was much admired and will always be remembered by those who knew him as one of the all-time great local running backs when he played football at Glynn Academy, where he gained a career total 2,800 yards and was selected all-region and all-state and was named a high school All-American. And whereas Mr. Rose went on to play for Auburn University, where he was elected the Tigers team captain in his senior year and was considered by some the best defensive back in the SEC. And whereas Mr. Rose led the Minnesota Vikings in interceptions in his rookie year in the NFL, going on to play for New Orleans Saints and finishing his professional football career with the San Francisco 49ers. And whereas Mr. Rose then returned home to be head coach at Glynn Academy in 1970 and later a defensive assistant coach for Auburn in 1972 before going on to a successful career for over 20 years with Crown Distributors in Albany and Brunswick. And whereas Mr. Rose was inducted into the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame in 2009 and the Glynn County Sports Hall of Fame in 2012, he was a role model for the student athletes of this county and a valued friend and grandfather. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Glynn County Board of Commissioners hereby establishes today, April 6th, to be now and annually hereafter George Rose Day in Glynn County, adopted this 21st day of March, 2021 by the Glynn County Commissioners. So, we thank Mr. Rose for his lifelong dedication, and of course, we share in the sorrow of his passing. But what a great contributor to Glynn County and his love for youth. We will present that. Is there anyone from the family here today? Okay, that will be presented to them. And thank you for that time. Item number 1 is to receive a presentation from First Tyron Advisors regarding the SPLOST 2022 cash flow analysis and projecting timing. Mr. Jason Hagan, I guess Mr. Fallon will lead this charge for us today.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm going to turn this over to Jason here in a second, but I just wanted to explain a little bit about the process that we took here related to the SPLOST 22 projects moving forward. And so one of the things that we did initially was bring on a financial analysis firm to help us kind of look at what we had for money, what we had for cash flows, look through the projected revenues that we were going to start collecting. Again, that starts April 1st. We haven't received any SPLOST funding as of yet. Those collections do start in April, and then we see our first check at the end of May. But we wanted to move forward with a process that we could be both effective and efficient. And so trying to be more fiscally responsible, considering the fact that bond rates now are much higher than they were even a year ago. And using some of the county funds that we have available to us to get some of these projects up and running, focusing mostly on design and then certainly on right-of-way acquisition. We are looking to put together that schedule of the projects to get started here soon. Big and small, more complex, some of the easier ones. We want to have a good blend of projects, not only based on complexity, but based on making a quick impact in some areas related to these projects, and then also focus on how much is done actually on the mainland, how much is done on St. Simons. And so we will come up with that actual schedule here after today's meeting. After we hear the briefing from the company that we used. But again, I'm pretty confident based on my conversations. I'm very confident, and based on my conversations with our CFO, Tamara Munson, that this process that we're looking to follow will actually save the county millions when it comes to potential interest that bonds would actually have cost us. So, Jason, do you want to come up and just introduce our guest?
Thank you, Bill. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ms. Amy Vittner comes to us today from First Tryon Advisors. Ms. Amy has 25 years plus in public finance. She's been with this company since 2013. Her specialty is working with local governments, and she's done that throughout the Carolinas and Georgia. And so she's going to have a presentation now.
Great. Well, it's great to be here with you today. I'm going to, before we talk about the SPLOST issue itself, I did want to give a little bit of an overview of our firm and who we are and what we do. And just since this is the first time you all have used a financial advisor before, just to let you know kind of what it is we do. So I think if we go to the next slide, it will give you a little bit of an overview of our firm. So First Tryon Advisors is an advisory firm. We don't do any bond underwriting, so sometimes you would have used an underwriter in the past. But what we do is we help cities, counties, universities, nonprofits, anyone who can issue potentially tax-exempt bonds. We help advise them in structuring, figuring out what the plan of finance is. We're not beholden to any particular type of structure or debt financing issue, since our role is really to look at all the options that are available for you. Our firm concentrates in the Southeast and in the Mid-Atlantic, and you see the dots on the map there kind of represent our client base in the region. On the next slide, just a little bit of background of what we do. Mentioned, so there's really three facets to our role. There's kind of pre-planning, capital planning, modeling, credit analysis, any of the pre-work that you would expect an advisor to take on. And that's kind of the stage that we are with the county right now. Transactional implementation, so if it's determined that you would need to go to the debt markets, our role would be to look at the different options available and come up with that plan of finance and help guide you through the process. Bring on the different parties that might be involved, so that's when you might get an underwriter involved or a bank involved, and help you through that to get you from point A to point B with money in the bank. And then just on an ongoing basis, we're always available for questions, ongoing credit rating, and maintenance, and that sort of thing. So now we're going to switch gears to the county's issue at hand, which is their SPLOST issue. So on the next slide, a little bit of review of where we are. The voters approved a referendum back in November. It passed. You're anticipating that sales tax proceeds will start to be collected starting in April, and I guess it sounds like they'll be coming in starting in May, really, starting from April 1st. So those will be collected over a period of 6 years. The referendum is split 78% go to Glynn County, 22% to the city of Brunswick, And the way the referendum was structured is you had Tier 1 projects and then Tier 2 projects. So the Tier 1 projects amounted to the anticipated revenue stream of, and when we're talking about the numbers that are really related to the county here, so about 103.7 million was anticipated of revenues from the sales tax collections. So that's the amount of projects that were put into the Tier 1 bucket. To the extent that those revenues come in greater than that, then you might be able to fund some of the Tier 2 projects that are on the list. So part of our role is to look at how do you anticipate the revenues how will those come in, and then look at your project list, and based on what staff has provided to date, and how you think the money might be spent, and see if there's a matchup or is there a gap between the revenues coming in versus the expenditures going out. And so to the extent that there is a gap, how do you fund that gap? Do you do a borrowing on the front end? Or do you have other funds on hand that you might be able to use, such as your fund balance, to bridge that gap in between? And then reimburse yourself as later SPLOST monies come in. Based on our preliminary analysis, it looks like you all do have enough funds on hand to be able to bridge that gap. Now that said, if projects were to accelerate, or money was spent more quickly, or revenue was to come in more slowly, that might change. So what we've done is we built a tool for the county staff to use that will help them as more information comes in, more variables are known, and the revenues actually start to come in to help assess whether or not there will be that shortfall in the future where financing may need to take place, or funds would be found to bridge that gap. On the next page, I talk a little bit about, so if you were to do a financing, how does that, what does that process look like? So I mentioned earlier, as an advisory firm, we're not partial to any type of structure. So in the past, you all have done public bond issues. That might be the right path to take, or maybe depending on the size and market environment, maybe placing that debt issue with a bank makes more sense. If it is sold, if your bonds are sold in the public market, is it a negotiated sale where you hire an underwriter on the front end, or does a competitive process where you have a bunch of underwriters bid on your bonds at the same time? Does that make more sense? So those are the kinds of decision points that would help kind of guide the county through. Some of the considerations that we look at is size. So smaller transactions kind of lend themselves more to a bank-placed sale. So if it's under 10 million, usually the cost of issuance start to add up and don't make sense. At some point, it doesn't make sense to go through a public process where you have a bond rating and offering document, and it's a little bit more staff time. Terms, so shorter terms, banks like shorter terms. So given that this would be kind of a 6-year or shorter financing, that would to match up to that revenue stream, that would lend itself more to the bank side. Issuance costs I mentioned earlier, publicly offered debt has more issuance costs related to them. And then interest rates are the big one. And right now, if we were talking 8 months ago, I would have said bank rates and versus public market rates are pretty close to one another. Right now, where we sit, it's been kind of an interesting whirlwind of events in the world of interest rates. But right now, publicly offered debt is actually pretty significantly lower than bank debt. So that would be something that, if at some point you all decided you needed to go into the debt market, the first thing that we would do is conduct that analysis and say, okay, well, what's the right path that's going to save you the most money? All right, so if we go to the next slide, a little bit about what we've done today and some of the pre-work that we've done to help prepare you for these revenues that are going to start coming in this spring. So we've been working with staff to develop a tool that will help with forecasting. Right now, we're just kind of leveling out 103 million. What does that look like spread out over 6 years? But as those revenues start to come in May, June, and July, we'll be able to start. This tool will help. Will allow them to, they'll be able to update that tool as more revenue, or as more information is known, to see if, how things are tracking in terms of the revenues coming in, if they're coming in ahead of schedule or behind schedule. The tool will help kind of organize and prioritize projects. So one of the features of it, for instance, is you'll be able to put a, so for a particular project, if you plan on starting in July or whatever, you can kind of tailor what the construction spend schedule might look like on those projects. The tool will look at timing of the projects versus those cash flows coming in and assess, like I said earlier, and whether there's going to be a funding gap at all. On the next slide, part of the tool itself is a series of dashboards where it will list all the projects that were in the referendum, the amount that was approved and authorized within the referendum, what the actual cost might be, and if there are other funding sources. So that will just help the staff kind of track how those projects are coming in based on the initial estimates in the referendum. The tool also allows you can tag whether a project will be funded with PAYGO, so will it be directly funded out of the SPLOST proceeds that come in, or will you issue some kind of debt offering for it? So there's a toggle switch that allows them to look at those kind of scenarios very quickly. Financing, and if there is to be a debt issue, it will allow you to customize what the debt structure looks like. So will you issue that debt over 4 years or 5 years or 6 years? And you can put an assumed interest rate into there. And then I mentioned earlier, it also allows you to customize draw schedules on the individual projects. On the next slide, there's the one piece of it that we'll have a tab where all the cash flows come together and identify where there may be, if there's a shortfall, just because maybe you're spending money faster than it's coming in. It allows you to identify those. So, and then I think on the next slide, we have just a picture of what this looks like and how we track this. There's the blue on the page is meant to be the SPLOST fund balance. The way this is set up initially, you've got those SPLOST proceeds coming in monthly over time. You've got construction projects starting, you're starting to spend money on construction projects. Initially, there will be a gap, and I think, but given you all's healthy fund balance, the idea would be, well, could you all basically borrow from yourselves to fund that gap until additional proceeds from the sales tax referendum roll in. So that's what this envisions here. So the green represents your capital projects fund. That you'd be drawing from that in the interim. And then as those proceeds from the SPLOST roll in, you'd be reimbursing yourself for those SPLOST proceeds. And then if there were to be a shortfall, which currently we're not showing one, then that would be flagged in red in here. So it shows a negative red on that bar chart. So it's a very easy visual way as you're putting in different timing scenarios for construction and revenues are coming in on the SPLOST proceeds to very quickly see whether you're on track or not. All right, so on the next page, really just to summarize and just go over some next steps. So we'll continue to work with county staff, particularly as revenues come in. It will be great to see kind of what those numbers actually look like. And then continue to refine the cash flow tool as more is known on the construction front and timing of the construction projects. And then is where if there does appear to be if construction is rolling along more quickly than anticipated, and you may need to consider a debt issue at some point, we're there to help on that piece as well. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions.
Bring on the money.
All right, well, hopefully it'll start rolling in here soon for you.
That's not a question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is Tamara. I just wanted to make a couple of comments to follow up on Amy's presentation. Her and her staff have been extremely helpful in helping Jason and I analyze this process. But I did want to let you know, when we looked at the different options for borrowing, we were looking at possibly anticipated interest costs in the amount of around $5 million. So, that was not built into the SPLOST program. And we would have had to come up with that $5 million from somewhere else to borrow those funds, especially with as much as rates have increased over the last several months. So in doing that, that is why we've worked with her team to try to get a good schedule and work to time these projects. So that we don't have to borrow all those funds up front and we can save that money in interest. So just wanted to follow up and let you know that Amy's given us a great tool to work with on ongoing long-term throughout this SPLOST issuance.
Thank you, Ms. Munson.
All right, thanks, Tamara. A couple things just to add as well. So the project timeline, we're still working on that. So we're close on that. And that graph that was shown reflects some of the projects that the projects that we plugged in already, not going into the red. So we didn't, as you noticed, we didn't see any red up there. There might be occasion though, as we mentioned, where we do want to get started on some of these projects a little bit sooner. So we might have to go into debt in some of these areas, and we'll certainly work with the company to figure out the best way to move forward. We will, again, we want to get going on this, and I think that we want to get started on SPLOST. One thing that we heard over the summer when we were talking about SPLOST in our various presentations was, well, you didn't finish it in the time frame that you had. We don't get a check on day one, so these projects, we're not going to have every SPLOST 22 project finished within 6 years, but we're going to have the majority of them finished, we hope. We want to make sure that we finish as much as we can. We certainly want to start every project that we have, and that's going to be our goal for sure. And I think through this plan, we're going to not really have much of an issue getting started with all the projects. But I just want to make sure that everybody understands there are going to be projects that are going to go past 2028. That's normal when you have projects like this, and when you have a SPLOST. We see it in other counties. We see it in some cases where some counties are still working on SPLOST from over 20 years ago. That's not our intent. So with the projects that we have, we want to make sure that we get those done as timely as possible. So I think through this process, we're going to save some money, but we're also going to be effective and be able to get these projects started. So Jason's working on that final timeline now, and so hopefully we'll be able to introduce that as a recommendation to you next month. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Chairman, may I add a word to that? When we get going on this process, it was 2016 was finished up, and we kept getting a lot of words slinged at us that projects weren't finished. That people need to remember that when you move into these large projects, there's acquisition of right-of-way, which sometimes the people there, the property owners, don't always come up with what we need, and sometimes we have to go to court, and that can delay it. That's probably one of the most significant things. Your design, but really acquisition of right-of-way for projects, infrastructure projects like that can be set back pretty tremendously by lawsuits and frivolous lawsuits and right-of-way acquisitions. So it's not like, bam, it's done within a certain time.
Certain permitting.
Right, yes, and
through
permitting with Corps of
environmental
Engineers
issues
and
and,
DNR, that's right.
There's a lot of mitigating circumstances. Thank you. Commissioners, any other comment on this?
Well, we've got an advantage that you didn't have in 2016. We've got a project manager, and we're trying to stay ahead of it.
Yeah. And I think we have a good plan in effect, and we'll continue with it. Thank y'all. Anything else before we move on? Item number 2, discuss a proposed amendment to Chapter 2-26 of the Glynn County Code of Ordinances to amend Section 2-26-15 of the Public Conduct Ordinance to remove Selden Park Gym as an authorized location for the consumption of alcoholic beverages and for other purposes. And this was Commissioner Booker's forward, but Ms. Garganis, I think you can carry this ball for us.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Lisa Garganis, Recreation and Parks Director. Yeah, and I think Commissioner Booker may be tuned in as well, but I don't know if he has anything to say. But yeah, we're bringing this item forward just for your for discussion and input relative to the county's public conduct ordinance as it relates to parks. The conversation, well, we've been looking at the recreation and parks ordinances, Will Worley and I, for probably several weeks, 2 or 3 years, and we're making some changes and kind of bringing our recreation and parks ordinance up to, you know, making some correction, adding Glen Haven Park and some other things, just kind of making some tweaks to those ordinances, and I believe those will be coming forward to you in the near future. But it also kind of got us looking at other ordinances that related to parks and park operations, and we had some conversation, I had a conversation with Mr. Fallon and Commissioner Booker last fall, and we were talking about the possibility of removing the Selden Park Gym from the ordinance that allowed alcohol added. We probably average at least 1 to 2 rentals activities at that gym over the course of a year, 1 or 2 a month, that has an alcohol component to it. Selden Park is a beautiful park. It's rich in history, and we have a lot of recreational activities that go on at that park. We have a lot of family events. We have the youth basketball season. It was going 6 or 7 days a week. We have a lot of picnics and things that happen at that park. The fields are being used more for activities now, whether it's the soccer activities on Sundays. We have baseball activities on the fields in the evenings, the pool. It's kind of a different park than some of the other parks that are on the list that are already approved for alcohol, where some of those parks are more passive parks that things aren't going on. Selden does have a lot of recreational activity. A lot of kids and families are at that park doing things at all times of the day. And so bringing forward for your consideration to possibly remove the Selden Park Gym from allowing alcohol. There have been some incidences that have resulted from the alcohol use at the park, and so this also is a possible step to take that would hopefully minimize those activities. We did discuss the idea of this with the police chief at the time, and it was supported at that time. And I think Interim Chief O'Neill Jackson also supports that, because when things happen at any of our parks, obviously they're the ones who have to respond and deal with some of the fallout. The public conduct permit is something that is under Chief Jackson's purview as far as issuing public conduct permits, and so that's why this piece is under his, under his jurisdiction as far as what's approved and what's not. Some of the rental activities that occur at Selden, they can go till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and that is concerning for me to have our staff out that late. We don't generally have rentals in our parks that go much past about 11 o'clock. So this might allow us to be able to amend the rules for rentals to let folks get out of the parks at a decent hour and let our staff safely get out and get home. It's something for you guys to consider and discuss. And there are more parks not on the list than there are on the list. And if there are other parks that y'all would maybe want to consider for discussion and for the same type of thing, we could do that as well. But we're just looking for some direction in your input.
Go ahead.
I see Blythe Island Park, but is that Blythe Island Regional Park or another park there other than that? The boat ramp or
I
the
would
baseball?
assume it's Blythe Island Regional Park, but Aaron might be able to,
Can you
because
scoot
it
up?
doesn't specify, you're right, but I would assume it's a regional park. It's on
Item
page
G.
2
It's on
of the,
next page.
yes, so it's G up there. And I would assume it's the regional park and not the ballpark or
That's, I guess we need some clarification on that. One question, and this may be for you, Aaron. If there's something like a special permit that they were wanting to use in a park, would that be permittable?
This is that special permit process, so the board created this ordinance 13 years ago or so to allow alcohol in parks. Previously was not allowed. So this is that special permitting process. So if you want to add or take away where you want it allowed, this is the place. This is the ordinance to do it in.
I see. So not an individual permit?
Well,
For a special event, I guess is where I'm going.
correct. So this special conduct ordinance sets forth, if you have a special event, this is where you would apply or how you would apply to get your special event permit to have alcohol at that location. So if it's not in the ordinance, if it's not one of those 6 or 7 listed parks, then you know that application for alcohol would be denied if it's not listed here.
But this is listed, so it would continue to be allowed. We're just removing Selden.
That's
from
correct.
it.
That's correct. So this is the ordinance out as it currently looks. Well, I'm sorry. This is minus the Selden Park. This is how it normally looks.
Would be amended.
Correct. Correct.
It's about miles on Region Park. With
Aaron, I think Sammy's question is the campground. You know, if somebody's camping there and they're sitting outside,
Right.
is it allowed or not allowed?
That we would. I mean, if that's their.
It would
That's
be
their-
basically on the site there.
Yeah.
But I think maybe you're looking at this thing.
I-
These are the areas where it is allowed, where alcohol consumption is allowed.
With a
in these
permit,
parks.
with a permit, with a special use permit.
Okay.
At Blythe Island Regional Park, we do say that the alcohol is not allowed in general at campsites and stuff. Now, I'm sure there are people in their
Yeah,
comfort of their campers are doing what they do.
We know
but-
different, yeah.
But our staff in general, we don't permit them to ride around on a golf cart.
in the
with
common areas.
Yes, sir, no, sir. At the marina, no, it's none, it's no alcohol. So,
But at their individual campsites that they rent from the county, they are permitted. Or,
we don't really go police all of that. If there's somebody that's unruly, I mean, obviously, or complain about it, we would probably call the police in if we can't address it ourselves. But we don't go into campers and see what they're doing. We don't get in their business when they're in a campsite, I guess you could say. But,
Does it need to be listed that way or not?
yeah, I mean, there should be some special,
If the board would like to allow casual, maybe alcohol consumption, if you rent a spot, this would not be the place that I'd recommend we change. There's some other ordinances. We can clarify that, and that's allowed on your personal campsite or with your recreational vehicle or whatever, you may be in. So we would want to clarify that elsewhere, and if that's what the board wants to do, we
Well,
can bring that forward.
And I read this as, if they were taking one of the covered pavilions out there, that they'd have to have a permit if they were gonna have a party of any kind out there, then they'd have to have a permit to have the alcohol. But this sitting, to me, doesn't look like where they're addressing, somebody sitting at their campsite around a campfire and a couple of people drinking a beer or whatever.
That's exactly right. That's correct.
Lisa, as now, what time do we, if somebody rented out Seldom Gym, what time do we generally suggest they close, or I know we close some parts at 10, some at different times.
the current rental agreement allows folks to be there till 1 o'clock a.m.
So is that something that we want to address while we're addressing?
And
I
I'll
agree
be
with
honest,
you, that's mighty late
That's
for
pretty late.
That is.
staff.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a practice that we just have been doing. I don't know that that's in an ordinance somewhere that's allowed. But if that's, again, this is for discussion and input, and if that's something that y'all support, us scaling back on that, then, we certainly can amend our agreement. But I don't think it's in an ordinance that it states that that's the time.
well, I know that some, Gascon Bluff, I know that's on your list. I know that they rent it out for wedding venues, but that also could apply to Selden Park's gym if somebody wanted to rent it out for a wedding venue. They can use it for any purpose they choose.
Yes, sir.
Doesn't have to be playing basketball in there.
Right.
So if that would have to be special permitted, or there would be no permit for that. I'm just trying to see some open-ended questions that may come up at a later date. How would we address them? Because if we blanket things and we don't allow for certain things, then I think that could create some chaos.
Well, like, on this list is the casino pool, in the 5.5 years that I've been here, I've never had a request to bring alcohol to the casino pool. So looking at this, that may be one that gets struck from the list because it's a swimming pool, like alcohol and swimming pools.
I was thinking more the gym, not the pool.
Yes, sir.
But it's on the property.
Right.
But this is specific for Selden Park Gym.
The way this has been presented today, yes, sir, it was specific to Selden Park Gym.
So they'd still be able to rent it for events, but just not have alcohol.
That's not.
Right.
So if they were having a wedding, then there would be an alcohol-free wedding.
Right.
Or whatever function, or family reunion,
Birthday
or,
parties seem to be a lot of what those 15 and 16-year-old birthday parties.
Yeah, I'm just
where
trying-
alcohol is served to the 21-year-old.
I'm just trying to foresee unforeseen questions that may arise in the future, and then we have a problem with it.
I don't see any need in that park being open till 1 o'clock in the morning. either.
I agree.
I'd say 11 at the latest.
Yeah.
There's a gate there, isn't it, at Selden?
There's an entrance, but we don't have a gate that, it was damaged during an automobile accident and it hasn't been replaced. We've talked about it. We do have some good security cameras right there at the front entrance that were installed in the last year.
No big broadcasting now.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Garganis?
Is Commissioner Booker able to speak? Is he on?
Here you come.
Hey, yes, I'm in complete support of this, removing the alcohol, permitting that. And also, reducing the hours. I don't know, if, because I didn't realize that, it went to that, to 1 o'clock in the morning either. So what do we do in the other parts? Is it just 11 o'clock?
Most of them are 10.
Most of them are 10.
11.
10.
10, 11.
Oh, my island.
We have some ball tournaments that may go till 11 o'clock at night, at North Glen on occasion, rain delays. They don't intentionally do that, but yeah, there's some activities do go until about 11. I think 11 is reasonable.
So you want to add in 11 o'clock as a stop time? Commissioner Booker?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, because the staff been out there at that time, I would have a concern about that.
So let us take a look at the agreements that we put in place when people do rent the facilities, if we have times specified there versus times specified on the ordinances. And I think we can control the rentals, the times based on the rental agreements that we put in place.
Oh, I agree, because, in some parks are organized sports oriented, and some parks aren't. And somebody just brought up an interesting point about rain delays, and if it's a tournament going on and, and you can't get back on the field till 10 o'clock at night, you've been sitting there for an hour and a half, and then the park closes, in an hour and you're not finished your game, what happens then? So that's interesting.
Well, this is really about the liquor, specific to that gym.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about closures of the parks too. That just got incorporated in. So,
Yeah, if we want to just hold up on that and let staff handle that at their discretion, then I'm good with that.
Yeah, and I think we can do that, like Mr. Fallon said. We can go back and look at our agreements, and knowing that y'all support an 11 p.m. end time, we can amend our agreements to follow that direction.
Okay.
thank you.
Any other discussion on this? Thank you, Ms. Garganis. We have a rather short agenda for today, but before we would adjourn, I think it might be wise for us to adopt our proclamation in a formal adoption of the George Rose proclamation, make it official. Could I get a motion for that?
Yes, sir, motion to approve, my former coach.
All right.
Second, my former coach as well.
All right, so isn't that great? I have a motion by Commissioner Fendig, a second by Commissioner Thompson to formally adopt the proclamation that we read at the beginning of the meeting. Any other discussion?
just one question. So is this going to be April 6th every year? So
Yes.
it's not just this year?
Right.
Just had a question that came across, so, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? All in favor, please raise your right hand. And since this is a formal vote, Commissioner Booker, can we get a...
Aye.
All right, aye from Commissioner Booker, so that is unanimous. Thank you. Is there any other business to come before us today? And no need for an executive session, so we stand